UFC 283 is this weekend, and I'm going to be showing you some of the prospects and up-and-comers to watch on the UFC 283 card. Whether you're casually watching this card because you have a name like Gilbert Burns or Brandon Moreno and you have some spare time to watch some of the earlier fights on the card, or you're a pretty big fan of the UFC and you want to see what my prospects and up-and-comers are to watch on the UFC 283 card, this may be good for you. This is a relatively new video idea, so I'm going to be putting these guys in more of a requirement type, like they need to have a certain amount of this, certain amount of that. And if you guys could let me know what I could improve and what you think of this list, let me know. I'm probably going to do around 3 fighters, so there's not going to be too many. I'm just going to go a little bit more in depth than just those few fighters. So I'm going to go straight into the requirements. I'm not going to do any more of the talking. For the requirements, I have about 4 or less UFC fights in the UFC. So a guy like Thiago Moises in this card, even though he is unranked, like it says in the next one, you have to be unranked in the UFC. But because he is unranked, but he does have more than 4 fights in the UFC, he's not going to be able to go into this pool, I guess, if you want to call it. But I didn't include a guy like Terrence McKinney. I didn't exactly list the reasons here. I want to put guys more on momentum, either kind of debuting and they have some really good skills, or a guy like Terrence McKinney who did win his first couple fights against like a Matt Frivola, but then lost to a Drew Dober. I'm not gonna necessarily include him because I feel like his momentum kind of stymied there. Even though he's still very talented and still a very good prospect, his momentum kind of stymied there. And I think a lot of people he also has like a pretty decent name value also. But I think he's starting to regain that momentum too. He's a pretty big fight, so I'll probably go over it in the next slide just to give you a little hint of who I am putting on this list. So without further ado, let's get right into it. We have Ismael Bonfim. He is going against Terrence McKinney in this matchup. So I figured I can probably just discuss both of them here even then. But Ismael Bonfim is making his UFC debut. I'm not necessarily counting the Contender Series fight against Nariman Abasov. Before that, in the LFA, he did fight Andre Augusto and Rangel. I don't know how to say that name. But he brought all those fighters to a decision, won all those fights by a decision. Also, he's kind of like his brother. Him and his brother are very skilled. He is a little bit older. He is 27 years old. But his brother kind of has a lot of forward pressure, kind of just goes, sets up a lot of combos, just starts flowing. He kind of thinks out his punches a little bit more, thinks about them, which is why I think this fight against Terrence McKinney could really go either way. He has all the skills in the world, but Terrence McKinney's super fast and super explosive early in the fight. But not to get into necessarily a prediction, you can watch my full card prediction for this fight if you want to in another video. But notable fights that he has fought, I'm going to do this for guys that have fought some pretty big names in the UFC or in other companies or champions like Adriano Moraes. So Renato Moicano in the UFC, I believe he is ranked at lightweight. He might not be ranked, but I'm pretty, he is ranked at lightweight. I don't know what I was thinking. Renato Moicano, he did lose to him like a while ago. I want to say like 2014 or something, like a long time ago. And then did lose to Adriano Moraes in like his second fight, who was the previous one champion. Did beat Demetrius Johnson at bantamweight. So Adriano Moraes is not a bad fighter per se. So it's not a bad loss. He only has 3 losses. These are 2 of the 3 losses that he had. And yes, so for his fight against Terrence McKinney, it's a pretty big fight. If you really wanted to watch it, it's a very important fight. I feel like it's going to show a little bit more for the UFC who they want to push a little bit more. I guess I said that word already, but for Terrence McKinney, he's coming off that loss to Drew Dober, who's a good fighter himself. He did rock him. He did have his moments in that fight. Did come in on short notice. But I feel like this is more of, if Terrence McKinney loses this, I think the UFC is not going to push him as hard, even though he is a very talented fighter. But for Bonfim, this is very important. Also, I think if he gets a win over Terrence McKinney, which is a pretty good win, I think the UFC will be on board with pushing him. But I think they're a little bit more not as willing to push him like his brother Gabriel Bonfim, who I think is a little bit skilled, just because I think he's a little bit faster, and I think he just goes, honestly, and gets those finishes. And this guy, Ismael Bonfim, has gotten guys to decisions. So that's probably why the UFC are putting him with Terrence McKinney, throwing him in the fire immediately on his debut. He is also 27 years old, so you got a little bit of time there to develop. But this is a super big fight to watch for the UFC this weekend, and that's like my third ranked fight, so I'll start moving up a little bit more. I didn't necessarily put these guys into an age range because even if you look up prospect on like Google or something, it'll tell you like 24 years old or 24 or less. There's not many of those guys on this card, so let's move on to the next guy here. I guess I kind of spoiled one of the sides there, but Gabriel Bonfim, his brother, I put both of the Bonfim brothers. Realistically, probably shouldn't have done that, but I feel like these guys are probably some of the most skilled debuters on this card, so that's why I put them there. Gabriel Bonfim hasn't really fought any UFC competition outside of him being in the UFC. So for his last fight on the Contender Series, which he was on the same card with his brother, he fought Trey Waters, Eduardo Garvin, Brenner Alberth also. I don't know why I said it like that, but for Brenner Alberth, he did win that fight by TKO. Did face some adversity in the second round. I believe he did get hurt, and then he was kind of just held down on the ground for the remainder of that round, and then came out in the third round and KO'd the dude. So pretty impressive there. He was really young there too. I think he was like 23 years old. So in his next fight against Eduardo Garvin, he was able to hurt him pretty bad, or not hurt him pretty bad, but he was able to piece him up on the feet. Was actually doing really well, like piecing him up. Like he wasn't missing any shots. Super fast. Had some really good pop in his shots. Was able to get him down and then put him in a Darce choke into his guard, which was pretty cool. And then against Trey Waters on the UFC Contender Series, he was able to get him into a Von Flue choke, which was pretty impressive also. Very technical, really good on the feet and really good on the ground. Is really technical with his hands, good pop in his shots, like I said, and then good on the ground. So that's what makes him a pretty good prospect for the UFC, and why I think the UFC are trying to push him a little bit. He is fighting against Manur Lazez, I want to say is his name. I kind of screw up his name a lot, but he is fighting this weekend. He against a guy that's actually a pretty solid fighter too. Yeah, Manur Lazez, on the feet at least, and is pretty lengthy. So a guy like Trey Waters, who came in on short notice, who had 77 inches of reach, and kind of prepares Gabriel Bonfim, especially winning against a guy like Trey Waters, who does have that big reach advantage over him, and then on short notice and then beating him. And then fighting a guy like Manur Lazez, who also has, 76 inches of reach, is going to be tough for him in general, but I think he's going to be able to get to the ground and submit him here. But if he doesn't, I guess not if he doesn't, but even though, like, that factors, like, even though I do think he's going to win the fight, he's still a really good prospect and a good guy to keep an eye on. So that's why I put him second on this list. I do think he's a little bit more talented than his brother. Only 25 years old, so he has a lot of development to go. Not in a bad way, but like he can still keep improving, and he has a very high ceiling. So Gabriel Bonfim is that guy for number 2 on the list. And the reason why I didn't put an age range for this one is because I put Jailton Almeida. I'm sure you guys have heard his name before. I just fit in with the category unranked, less than four or less fights in the UFC. Last fight against Anton Turkalj, against Parker Porter and Danilo Marquez. He pretty much straight up dominated all of them. He's a monster, I'm just going to be honest. He takes the guys down that are so much heavier than him, takes them down, smothers them on the ground, and then submits them all within the first round. Has looked absolutely dominant in all of his fights. He's going to be fighting Shamil Abdurakhimov, who is like 41 years old, who's ranked number 14, which is why I put Jailton Almeida at number 1 on this list, because I think he's going to be able to beat Shamil Abdurakhimov and get ranked because of beating him at rank number 4. Not exactly at rank number 14, but because Shamil Abdurakhimov is number 14. And this fight has actually been made 2 times before, so this is the 3rd time it's been made. Shamil keeps pulling out of the fight, especially, I think, 2 months beforehand and then another 2 months beforehand. So they've been trying to schedule this fight. They've been trying to get Jailton Almeida into the rankings, which I think they will, and this is why I put him at number 1, because he can get straight into the rankings. Looks like a monster, runs through everybody he's fought, and has looked super impressive. So this is my list of UFC prospects and up-and-comers to watch. The reason why I put up-and-comers really in this title is to give me a little bit more leeway, because some cards, it's a little rough around the edges sometimes, but Jailton Almeida is 31 years old, so I reckon they could probably push this guy quite a bit. He's relatively active too, especially for a heavyweight. There's a reasons I didn't put guys like Daniel Marcos or Simon Oliveira or Luan Lacerda. I'm just going to run through a bunch of names. Who else do we got? I think those, or Bruno Ferreira, or even like an Ihor Peterias, because I think they are more, I don't think they're more all-around fighters. Don't think they have the build, or not necessarily build, but they're not 25 years old, 27 years old. Even though Jailton Almeida's 31, he's like super dominant, and he's demolishing every guy he spots. So that's why I put him there. But outside of that, these guys are younger, super skilled, and they have a lot of time to develop, and they're going to be guys who actually watch on this card. So yeah, those are very important fights for these guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you let me know what you think of it. This is a new idea. I'll probably do it for a couple weeks just to track how these videos do. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys